Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a special guest. We have Brad Buchanan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Arash. Thank you. How about yours? How about yourself?
Very good, very good. So, to get us started here, and this is the toughest questions, and it'll get easier as we go along,
Oh,
is
good.
how would you briefly describe yourself? And I know there's a lot to talk about. You can talk about whatever you want.
Okay, I would briefly describe myself as a retired English professor, now full-time writer, who has also survived two bouts of blood cancer and survived a very rocky stem cell transplant. I'm now technically disabled with a chronic illness that I manage pretty well with medications and so forth.
Mm. You've written a lot of different things too, and we're going to talk about your novel in a moment. But what are some other things you've written about too?
Yeah, so I've been writing poetry since I was a kid. So
Cool.
I've published four books of poems. I got another book coming out next year. I've also th written three academic books on somewhat obscure topics. I don't need to bore you with them. And then I wrote a medical memoir um, called Living with Graft versus Host Disease. And graft versus host disease is the illness I got after my stem cell transplant when my new immune system, which was protecting me against cancer, but it also had a few ideas of its own, and it started attacking the rest of my body when it first was engrafted in me in early 2016. And so I was really ill, had a rash from head to toe. I was actually blinded for about a year and a half because of
Oh
it,
my God.
and it almost killed me straight out.
Mhm.
But it has slowly morphed into this chronic illness that I have today, which is, oh, I'm sorry, which is essentially, a minor annoyance, but it takes some attention to manage it.
And you wrote Spy's Mate with all those challenges, which is amazing, a novel. And we want to
Right.
talk about that because
Yeah.
it includes chess, and you are a chess fan, also chess history. You've looked into that. I myself played chess too when I was younger. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, let's talk about it. What is it about? What would you say?
Yeah. So chess, the story of Spy's Mate is basically how a young grandmaster growing up in the Soviet Union rises through the ranks of the Soviet chess elite while also having to contend with interference, manipulation, and surveillance from the KGB, who were, as a matter of historical record, heavily involved in the chess world in the late 80s and so forth, when the Soviet Union was kind of collapsing. The well, and before that too, actually. But basically, the Soviets viewed chess as a propaganda tool. That if they felt that if they could claim that they had the greatest chess players in the world, that somehow proved that communism was the way to go. Um, and so they were willing
A
to
smart
pull up.
choice, they would say that's a smart choice because smart people live here and play here, right? So
Yes,
it's kind of to show
exactly.
off in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were very invested in making sure that the world chess champion was always not only, from the Soviet Union, but also a very loyal communist. Um, and um, and any grandmasters who displayed any dissatisfaction with the Soviet way of life or wanted to leave were often punished. They were kept under surveillance. They were marginalized. All their privileges were taken away. And yeah, basically they were treated as criminals. However, the KGB had to be somewhat careful because they were still assets, right? They were still
Mm.
evidence that people in the Soviet Union, were intellectually superior to everybody else. So the KGB had to sort of tread carefully in these chess worlds because they didn't want to, just throw everybody in prison. And a lot of the chess players, because they were highly intelligent and highly educated, tended to chafe against the restrictions of the Soviet way of life and also of communist ideology. they were able to travel to the West for tournaments, a lot of them. And so they got a taste for Western freedoms and Western consumer goods and all the rest of it. Um, but yeah, the KGB also pulled various covert operations to kind of try to punish and impede some of their own players who they didn't see as desirable world champions. So there's one, mention of the book of an episode where a KGB agent tried to infect the wife of a grandmaster with a horrible, uh, you know, uh, sexually transmitted disease by pouring vials of the stuff on her underwear. And oddly enough, it didn't work. But they tried that sort of thing just to distract the players that they didn't want to do well in these tournaments. Needless to say, they also connived among themselves um, as chess players. They were told basically, you play nicely with each other, you make easy draws with each other, and then you play to win, and you fight to the death against outsiders. And Bobby Fischer complained about
Mhm.
this at the time,
Yeah.
and he was absolutely right that they were sort of conspiring among themselves to make it as difficult as possible for someone outside of the Soviet system to become world champion. Now, Fischer, of course, succeeded despite these efforts. And also Garry Kasparov, who was sort of an outsider, like my protagonist, by the way, who's very loosely based on Kasparov's career.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Kasparov was an outsider. He's not an ethnic Russian, of course.
Mhm.
He was a mixture of, I believe, Armenian and Jewish extraction. So they
Mhm.
didn't really like the look of him to start with. He didn't look like the
Mhm.
Russians that they wanted to promote. Um, but he was just too strong. They couldn't stop him. And that's
Mhm.
really the point of Spy's Mate, is that Yasha, the hero, has to prove that he is a good enough player, that he can get past all these obstacles. He too is an outsider. He was born in the Armenian Republic, and yeah, he has no special love for communism, and he's also working against a very sinister world champion who is modeled on Anatoly Karpov, who of course was a model communist, did everything he was told, and now of course under Putin he's a model oligarch taking advantage of whatever system will keep him, in funds.
And it's interesting, Kasparov went into politics and ran here for to become a leader and a president. So kind of
Yeah.
interesting that again that kind of link with politics that you talk about. At the same time, on the other side, Bobby Fischer was paranoid, definitely, but also he was right on different things. And
Yes.
this is not his paranoia speaking. This was based on facts. And I believe his mother was Soviet too. She was Jewish and Soviet, right?
I know
Fischer.
Jewish, and I don't know exactly where she
Mhm.
came from
Mhm.
originally, but
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, Fisher had all kinds of conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
most of which are bogus,
Yes,
but
of
one
course.
about the Russians conspiring against him,
Yeah.
I think is pretty fair, honestly, and definitely agrees with a lot of the other evidence of the time of how things were operating.
Mhm. So it's also like it's about chess and chess competition. So kind of a bit like what we found recently was the Queen's Gambit, and that kind of I thought, in my view, again my limited knowledge about chess, I found that quite accurate. Except it never happened. I mean the main premise never happened, which kind of threw me off. I was hoping it was real, and then I checked it. It didn't really happen in that way. But the details about the chess world, I believe, was pretty authentic. Is that correct?
Well, from everything I know, and I too absolutely adored the Netflix series, and I went back
Mhm.
and read the novel too by Walter Tevis. I thought it was wonderful. It did a great job of making chess feel very dramatic and very
Mhm.
sexy also.
Mhm.
I think it was
Mhm.
very sexy chess.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of inspired to write Spy's Mate
Mhm.
by seeing how well the Queen's Gambit
Yes.
translated
Yeah.
onto the screen and by seeing the big impact that it had on popular culture,
Mhm.
especially in North America,
Mhm.
where chess all of a sudden was kind of at the center of what people were watching. And I thought, okay, this is really cool. And of course, I love chess. I'm obsessed with the game. And I thought, okay, well, one bone I had to pick with that
Okay.
But I agree with you that, the chess games were portrayed very accurately. I think Kasparov, in fact, was a consultant on
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Netflix series, so they spared no expense to make it realistic as far as the chess games themselves go. But the bone I had to pick with this series was they basically showed all of the Soviet grandmasters as kind of these benevolent old men, who are or middle-aged men who were perfectly happy to play nice games against this American lady and then to applaud her when she beat them.
Mhm.
The world of Soviet chess was much darker, much more sinister than that. And they did not welcome outsiders, even though some of the Russian people watching the games might have admired someone like Fischer, this outsider who came and played these incredibly exciting games of chess and beat some of the top Soviet players. Maybe the people of Russia applauded that, but the chess players themselves would not have been very happy about it, nor would the people, behind the scenes have been happy at all that their chess system had been undermined by a rank outsider whose values they did not share. But yeah, I think all of the chess details in the Queen's Gambit were on point as far as the games went, and I tried to do that in my book as well,
Mhm. Cool.
using real games, often very famous games, as the model for the games I described Yasha playing at various points in his career. And I wanted to reproduce some of the same visual appeal of chess that I saw on screen in the Queen's Gambit with diagrams
Nice.
in
Yeah.
in the novel.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, that hasn't really happened in a lot of chess fiction. I certainly haven't found any chess novels that have as many diagrams illustrating the key positions in these
Mhm.
important games, where Yasha is kind of playing for his life against these top grandmasters, and you can see, in black and white, quite literally, how
Mhm.
the games are developing. So I hope the novel reproduces some of that. I also hope eventually it becomes a Netflix or,
Would be wonderful. Yes,
streaming
absolutely.
service
Yes.
production, because that's kind of how I conceived of it and how I wrote it. I didn't write it like a conventional
Mhm.
literary novel with lots of deep psychological characterization and lavish descriptions of the scenery. It was more like a screenplay, action and dialogue. And I wrote little scenes that could translate very well into a series like that. So anyway, yeah, Queen's Gambit is definitely an important point of reference
Yeah.
for Spy's Mate.
I mean, as a chess fan, I follow his Facebook group that has different moves of like really interesting moves before they do it, and so you try to figure it out, like what's the one move, and then it's brilliant, and I just love it. It's just like wow, okay, I didn't think of that, or you're sacrificing your queen, but then it's checkmate, that kind of stuff. It's very fascinating. So good for you to have
Yeah,
that with the diagrams in it. But I also want to talk about espionage and spies
yeah,
because this is actually like very similar to chess masters, what they have to do, because they have to think about every move and what the reaction will be and so on. And especially during the Cold War, where this was such a charged time, such an important time in history, I saw a documentary about different spies and double agents. There's actually a Russian double agent who gave the British information, Oleg Gordievsky, and it was just fascinating how he managed this without getting caught and supplying information, very vital information, which ended basically the Soviet Union because he was giving information about Thatcher, what she should do when she meets with Gorbachev, and that kind of stuff. And we don't hear about that. We just hear about the politicians, but not the the background, what goes on. And do you dive into that as well a little bit with your novel?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, you're absolutely right that the parallels between chess and the game of espionage during the Cold War are kind of like brilliant, right? And there are a lot of novels and nonfiction books about the Cold War, the sort of the conflict, and a lot younger people don't even know what we're talking about sometimes when we
Mhm,
talk about the
mhm,
Cold War. But basically, the conflict between the West, primarily the United States, right, and the Soviet bloc, right?
mhm,
was played out as if it were a kind of chess match
Mm,
where there were lots of little pawns like other countries where the US and the Russians were kind of using proxy wars, to try to advance their own ideology, things like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
mhm, mhm,
So you really got the sense that, yeah, it was almost like two grandmasters sending out their little pawns and their knights and their rooks, to engage the others without really endangering themselves, their king. Um, and yeah, there's lots of images of the Cold War as almost a chessboard.
mhm,
Uh, so yeah, those parallels are very very fun to think about. But yeah, I delve a lot into the geopolitics
mhm,
of the ends of the Soviet Union because basically what's happening in the novel is as Yasha is progressing through the system, and having to deal with, other grandmasters and people who want to manipulate him, KGB agents who want to, sort of spy on him or report back on him, or limit his progress because they want to favor a different champion. As all that is going on, we see that basically the leadership at the very top of the Soviet Communist Party is starting to collapse. There's, an old General Secretary Bogdanov, I think I call him, who's sort of like I don't know, the Chernyenko figure. The top Soviet leader dies, and the question is, okay, who's going to replace him? And waiting in the wings, of course, is Gorbachev. I
mhm.
call him Ogarev in Spy's Mate, but it
Oh, cool.
basically the figure who's going to transform the way Soviet politics works, right? He's the one who's open to Western freedoms of a sort, who wants to make the country more democratic, who wants to modernize its economy, but who is also essentially going to be the means or the catalyst for the complete dissolution of the Soviet Union itself,
Mhm,
right? And to
mhm,
where it is today, which is no longer this empire, but rather Russia and a series of smaller countries around Russia that are quasi-autonomous to some extent.
mhm,
But again, as we see in the Ukraine, the Russians kind of want some of their empire back now.
mhm,
But anyway, yeah, Spies Mate takes us into the back rooms of high-level Soviet bureaucracy where these power struggles are unfolding. Because, of course, not everybody was happy when Gorbachev took office. There were
yeah,
people who wanted, to return to an older, more authoritarian regime. And of course, Putin was a part of the KGB,
mhm, mhm,
waiting in the wings, basically, to take over when this little fling with Western style democracy and, economic reforms and so forth had kind of died down a little bit. So Spies Mate is telling its story in that very interesting, very dynamic and unpredictable period of Soviet history.
mhm. And making chess sexy in the process, right? And
That's
exciting, right? And
that's
it
no
is, it is.
question.
I mean, you just uncovering something that is there. But also the title itself, I mean, relates obviously to spy, espionage, and checkmate. Is there
Yeah.
also a mate there? Is there romance? Is somebody who likes romance? Is there a bit of romance too, or not?
Well, yes.
Oh, good.
Yasha, the hero, he starts, he moves to Yerevan from a remote village in Armenia, where he meets a young lady named Keti, with whom he has a very nice sort of little platonic friendship because he's very young.
Mhm.
But then Yasha's affections, and I don't want to spoil too much of the novel,
No,
but
no,
yes,
no. Yeah, no.
Yasha's affections are distracted for quite
Mhm.
some time by another young lady who has an ulterior motive,
Oh, wow. Okay.
named Tatiana, who basically seduces him.
Mhm.
And anyway,
Yeah.
things continue along that line, but there's a sort of
Awesome.
triangle or
Yeah.
even quadrangle.
So romance fans will enjoy that too,
Oh
especially
yes,
those bits. Yeah.
yes, and also there's a very strong emotional bond between Yasha and his mother,
Mhm.
which is not, so much about the mating business, but
Mhm.
basically Yasha's mother is slowly dying of a chronic pulmonary issue,
Mhm.
and he forces her to promise that she'll live long enough to see him become world champion. which is a crazy promise for him to ask her to make. But she really is like, well, why not? What do I have to lose here? And that promise is sort of what drives Yasha on to try to achieve that rather lofty goal, very lofty goal, as soon as he possibly can, sometimes making bad decisions along the way. But yeah, it's definitely that his relationship with his mother is, I think, more important to him emotionally than any of the other relationships he has with young ladies of his own age, even though they're very important in how his life unfolds.
That's fascinating. Very three-dimensional characters there, especially like the pressure I can imagine that of like, trying to impress the mother and working extra hard and playing extra hard too. So that's just like whatever the aim is, whatever you're trying, it's gonna be tough, especially in the world of chess where there's so much
Yeah,
going against you and the stacks are against you with the additional like hindrances and
of
manipulations and again,
absolutely.
the seduction that just adds to it. So already quite fascinating. I want to talk about something else too, especially since I have you here, the influence of technology. Because so one of the things that's happened is back then we had also the space race. So we're trying to like they were competing with each other, and the U.S. won that one clearly, and so the chess one as well, right? In a sense. But then now with the appearance of these computer models that can defeat the best players in the world. And
Yeah,
I saw a documentary about how the Chinese government hated the fact that their best Go player lost against a model. And so it was complete embarrassment. And this is one of the main driving forces that they want to be number one in artificial intelligence. So that kind of propaganda of like, going like against the other countries to exceed in the realm of technology or space. What would you say about
yeah.
that? The fact that we have computers that are quote unquote smarter than humans in chess.
Well, it is a very interesting uh, thing to talk about and think about it. And some people think, oh, well, this will be the death of chess, right? Because a computer can beat all the human beings. And I'm like, no, quite the opposite,
Mm,
actually.
mm,
Because what we're interested in is the human stories behind the players, right? I don't
mm.
care which engine is the strongest. I care that whether, Hikaru can finally beat Magnus or whatever. These human
The drama that's
yeah,
in there,
a
personal drama.
psychodrama.
Yeah,
Chess is a psychodrama,
yeah.
first, last, and always.
Mm,
But I also talk about this in Spy's Mate, because the story is taking place basically where there are chess engines, there are chess, computers, but they are not anywhere near strong enough to play against and beat a strong grandmaster. They can be used as training tools, for specific positions, and that's how they feature in Spy's Mate. Um, but yeah, there's a whole plot line basically where we sort of follow the the career of a Russian computer scientist. Her name is Professor N, that's what I call her in the story, who's developed a chess computer called a Mayak that can calculate moves, but it takes about an hour to spit out a single move idea. So it's not anywhere close to being able to do what machines are in real time. But the funny and getting back to the race to see who
mm.
could develop the fastest technology, right? So the Soviets grossly overestimated their own capacities to innovate. They kept saying, "Oh yes, of course we'll produce the first, great chess computer," but they were completely wrong. The West was developing much better technologies, things like, the microchip.
And then the West overestimated what they could do. It went both ways, right? Because the West thought they were more advanced than Soviets actually were. There was a distortion
Yeah,
there too. Yeah.
yes, for sure. They sort of took the Soviet propaganda at face value,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
really what was happening most of the time is that the Soviets were trying to get a hold of Western technology
Hmm.
and then reverse engineer their own versions of it. And there was actually a very funny chess story, a news story actually, about a chess computer called Bell, and this is real, that was scheduled, that was bought by the Russians. It was scheduled to be shipped from the US to Russia, but customs officials in the US stopped it and said, no, we don't want them having this technology.
Hmm.
Because maybe they thought the Russians were going to use it for military purposes, you know. Um, and there's that aspect of things too, right? Is like, are we really going to pour all of our technical know-how into chess computers when really what we ought to be developing is, you know, higher tech missile defense systems or whatnot, the way the Americans were trying to do in the late 80s with things like Star Wars,
Hmm.
that program. So anyway, there's little touches of all, and that is a truly fascinating story. And again, Spies Mate is set in a period where we do have chess engines, and in fact, there's one player in Spies Mate who is cheating using an earpiece, and
Oh my
he's hooked up to someone who's telling him, you know, what the computer is telling him to play, but the computer isn't good enough really to make the best moves, and it's still possible to sort of outsmart the computer at that point in the history of this technology. So anyway, it's just another wonderful ingredient to add to the spicy mixture that I've tried to cook
God.
up here in this novel.
That's interesting. I never thought of cheating during a chess game, right? But I guess, yeah, that is possible, like the way you're explaining it. But it
Well,
seems hard to pull off, just to say.
yes, but they were experimenting that with that at this time. There were people who, you know, they had the technology to sort of hide earpieces
Hmm.
um, that could have radio signals transmitted into them so that people could hear what someone else was telling them to play. They did some experiments during that time
But why
at,
not get the best player, and then you don't have to tell them what to do. They know,
well,
that'd be the whole point, right?
it was sure,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but you know, they were people were just sort of seeing if it could be done,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah.
Like, you know, it was like, and forgive me, this is in perhaps poor taste, but since we're talking about it,
Hmm.
there were a couple of guys who tried the anal beads cheating strategy, right? There
Hmm.
was a joke made by somebody, maybe I think it was Elon Musk who came up with that weird notion, but there were a couple of British kids, I think they were basically very young dudes who decided to try it, and they actually found, yeah, you could use that to level up, you know, your game in a couple of instances. So it wasn't completely outlandish.
Yeah,
I think they found it very uncomfortable,
yeah.
but yeah, you know, as soon as people think that something's possible, always there's going to be somebody who wants to try it, even if it's absurd, even if there are much better ways of doing it. They still want to see, okay, let's see if this weird theory can actually work in real life. People are just curious, you know, animals, and in every sense of that word, curious. And so if you put a possibility out there, someone's going to try to see if they can make it work.
No
Uh,
matter how outlandish it may be.
yes, yeah, precisely. And frankly, you know, I think that type of curiosity fuels chess players as well,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're saying exactly, like AI and computers and so on, they can never come close to the spirit, the soul. I like to use the word soul here. And so with poetry too, I mean, it can try, it can come up with stuff, but there's something missing because that's again what makes poetry so unique. And I think that it will never be able to tap into that because it's not human. It doesn't have human experiences and feelings and emotions
Yeah,
and so on.
exactly. You know, I think what human beings write matters because we are precisely because we are mortal beings encased in flesh, right? With brains up here, bodies down here, knowing that one day we will die. And that's what makes what we do and say significant. And you know what some AI algorithm that will go on, you know, infinitely, um, what they have to say is not important to me. I mean, they might come up with some fascinating constructions and give people a lot of shortcuts to use if they don't like to write. But since I love writing and, you know, I write poetry just for fun with
Mhm.
no concept that it will ever make money or even make much sense to other people sometimes. Just to see what is going to come out of this rather banged up human frame that I inhabit on on a daily basis. That's why all this stuff matters because we are people with bodies that eventually decay and die.
And on that note, Brad Buchanan, thank you so much for being on Arash's World. Your book is Spies Mate. It sounds absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for being here, for giving us a taste of it. And hopefully there will be not only a movie but a series. I would love to see that. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's been absolutely delightful, Arash. Thank you so much. And I will say that pre-orders were very robust for Spies Mate, and so I'm already under contract to write a sequel,
Awesome.
Spies Mate 2. That won't be its title, I'm sure, but yeah, people seem interested in the book, and it's doing well so far. So I'm very hopeful that yes, I'll be writing at least one more of these type of chess
Make it a trilogy. Yes. Make
trilogy.
it a
Oh my
trilogy. Yeah, why not? Thank you so much.
God.
That's so much fun talking to you, Brad.
Likewise, Arash.